She didn't leave you, she dismantled you. Piece by piece, she methodically disassembled the man you thought you were, exposing the hollow framework you had built entirely around her approval. It wasn't a breakup, it was a psychological autopsy, performed while you were still breathing. She was the surgeon, and your predictable devotion was the disease she was cutting out. You thought your love was a fortress. In reality, it was a prison of your own making, and she simply grew tired of being the warden. You stand in the rubble of that relationship, not because she was a monster, but because you handed her the demolition codes. You gave her the keys to your emotional core, your sense of self-worth, your future, and then acted surprised when she drove away in the vehicle of your identity, leaving you stranded. You remember that final conversation? Not the words, but the atmosphere. The air grew thin, charged with a pity so profound it felt like contempt. Remember the look in her eyes? It wasn't anger. It wasn't even sadness. It was the flat, sterile boredom of a biologist observing a creature that has failed to adapt. She looked at you, the man who had memorized her coffee order, who canceled plans to be available, who measured his happiness by the curve of her smile, and she delivered the final verdict. You're just too predictable. That sting. It vaporized you. Then came the killing blow, the phrase that still echoes in your quietest moments. You lack a backbone. Clinical assessment of your structural failure. You had made yourself so safe, so reliable, so endlessly available, that you had erased every last trace of tension, of mystery, of sovereign power. You became a utility, as essential and as boring as running water, and she was thirsty for something else entirely. This is the cold battlefield of human desire, a territory you tried to win with unconditional surrender. You operated under the fatal illusion that affection was a currency you could accumulate through sheer volume. You flooded her market with your time, your attention, your validation, believing it would make you indispensable. Instead, you made yourself cheap. You violated the most fundamental law of value. Unlimited supply destroys demand. You became a commodity, freely available, and therefore worthless. You were not a prize to be won. You were a guarantee. In the brutal economy of attraction, guarantees are the death of desire. Philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer understood this ruthless engine of existence. He saw the world not as a stage for romance or reason, but as the manifestation of a blind, striving, insatiable will. A force that is never satisfied. You tried to satisfy it in her. You offered it everything, and in doing so, you revealed you had nothing left for yourself. As Schopenhauer noted, every man takes the limits of his own field of vision for the limits of the world. Your world was her, and so when she left, your universe collapsed. If this brutal truth resonates deep within your bones, if the echo of those words, predictable, no backbone, is a familiar ghost, then you have found your war room. This is not a place for healing wounds, but for forging armor. This is where we stop the bleeding by cauterizing the weakness that caused it. So, subscribe to Psychological Dominion, activate all notifications, and press the like button to signal that you are no longer a casualty, but a strategist. In the comments below, I want you to declare your ground. Tell me the city from which you are forging your new self, and the one memory of powerlessness you now vow to erase from your future. Let the world see the map of this new legion. You are at rock bottom now, scrolling through the digital void, searching for an answer to a question you can't even articulate. You think you want to know how to get her back. That is the wrong war. Winning her back is a skirmish. The real campaign is the reconquest of your own sovereignty. The question is not how to make her want you again. The question is how to rebuild yourself into a man whose own validation is so absolute, so unshakable, that her desire becomes irrelevant, a secondary consequence, not the primary objective. We are not here to learn pickup lines or manipulative tricks. We are here to study the fundamental physics of power, respect, and attraction. We are here to construct an economy of affection, where your attention is a scarce and valuable resource, invested wisely, never given away freely. Imagine for a moment a future encounter. Not one you force, but one that happens by chance. You see her across a room. There is no spike of anxiety in your chest, no desperate urge to be seen, to be acknowledged. Calm, centered. Your focus is on your own mission, your own world. She sees you, and she doesn't recognize the man she dismantled. She sees a new architecture, a self-contained fortress of quiet confidence. She sees a man who is no longer orbiting her, but who has become his own center of gravity, pulling everything and everyone else into his frame. In that single moment, a profound shift occurs. She is confronted not by the man she left, but by the man she could have had, the man she failed to see. How do you get from the rubble of today to that moment of unshakable power? What are the precise, actionable steps to forging that internal kingdom? That is the blueprint we are about to lay out. The journey from a predictable guarantee to an undeniable force begins now. Let us perform the autopsy. We must be cold, precise, and unforgiving, like a military debriefer analyzing a failed mission. Your relationship was that mission. Your authority was the territory you were meant to hold. You lost it. Not in a single, glorious battle, but in a series of quiet, pathetic skirmishes you didn't even recognize as warfare. This was a death by 1,000 concessions, and you held the knife for every single cut. This is the anatomy of your downfall. It began with the first test. It was likely so small you dismissed it as insignificant. Perhaps she was running late, not by 10 minutes, but by 45, and offered a casual, almost dismissive apology. You, eager to be the easygoing guy, said, "No problem at all." But it was a problem. It was a test of your time's value. You signaled that your time was infinitely flexible and therefore worthless. Or perhaps she made a slightly belittling joke about you in front of her friends. A small jab at your taste in music, your career choice, your ambitions. You laughed along because you didn't want to make a scene. You wanted her friends to like you. You wanted her approval. In that moment, you communicated that your self-respect was negotiable. She tested the fence. You didn't just let her through. You held the gate open and smiled. She tested, you yielded, she won. This was the first stage, emotional concession. You traded a small piece of your sovereignty for a fleeting moment of her comfort, not realizing you had just established the exchange rate for your entire relationship, and the price of your soul was cheap. From that first concession, the cancer of weakness metastasized. It created a pattern. The next stage was the loss of control. This is when you began to proactively manage her emotional state. Your decisions were no longer based on your own desires or principles, but on a predictive algorithm of what might upset her. Remember that weekend you had planned with your friends? A trip you had been looking forward to for months. The day before, she wasn't overtly angry, but the atmosphere she created was thick with unspoken disapproval. The short answers, the heavy sighs, the subtle martyrdom. She didn't have to forbid you from going. She didn't have to throw a tantrum. She had conditioned you so perfectly that you did the work for her. You canceled your plans. You told your friends something came up. You chose to stay, to placate her, believing this was an act of loving sacrifice. It was not. It was an act of abdication. You surrendered control of your own life to appease the whims of her emotional weather. You became the court jester, desperately trying to entertain a bored and fickle queen, hoping she might spare you her displeasure for one more day. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer would have recognized this instantly. He saw the universe as driven by a blind, insatiable force he called the will, a relentless, striving desire that can never be satisfied. You made the fatal error of trying to satisfy her will. You poured your own life force into this bottomless pit, thinking you could fill it. But the will, by its very nature, is a void. The more you gave, the more it demanded. You didn't calm the storm. You merely taught it that your ship was easily capsized. Once you've surrendered control, you become an addict. The third stage is the frantic search for validation. Her approval became your drug. Her smile was the hit that made the world feel right, and her indifference was the agonizing withdrawal. Your actions were no longer authentic expressions of self. They were calculated transactions designed to elicit a positive response. You bought her expensive gifts not from a place of genuine generosity, but from a desperate need to see her face light up and validate your worth as a provider. You showered her with compliments not because you were moved by her beauty in that moment, but because you were desperate to hear her say, "You're so good to me." You were performing, constantly tap dancing for an audience of one. You flooded her market with your affection, your availability, your servitude. You made yourself a 24/7 utility, always on, always available. You violated the most fundamental law of value. Scarcity creates demand. By making yourself infinitely abundant, you made yourself no longer a prize to be won. You were a public resource, as common and as unexciting as tap water. And she was thirsty for wine. She tested you, and you failed. Failed by showing her that the source of your happiness was not within you, but within her hands. No woman respects a man whose happiness she can grant or revoke at will. She may pity him. She may use him. But she will never, ever respect him. This addiction to validation inevitably leads to the prison of affective dependency. This is the terminal stage of your authority's disease. Your emotional state was no longer your own. It was a mirror, reflecting hers. If she had a bad day at work, you felt a crushing anxiety to fix it. If she was happy, you felt a temporary, borrowed relief. You had no independent emotional core, no inner kingdom. Your entire sense of self was outsourced to her. This is what she meant by no backbone. A backbone is an internal structure. It holds you upright, independent of external support. You had fused your spine to hers, becoming a grotesque appendage to her life, rather than a sovereign entity in your own. You thought this fusion was intimacy. She experienced it as suffocation. You were a weight, a responsibility. A man who needs a woman to feel like a man is not a man at all. He is a boy looking for a mother. And a woman cannot be sexually attracted to her son. When you apologized for things that weren't your fault, just to end a tense silence, you were not keeping the peace. You were signing a confession stating that her emotional comfort was more important than your reality, more important than truth itself. When you asked, "Is everything okay?" For the 5th time in an hour because she was quiet, you weren't showing you cared. You were demonstrating your terrifying insecurity, begging her to reassure you that your world wasn't about to collapse. Her silence is dominance, not disinterest. In that silence, she was watching you unravel, confirming everything she already suspected about your internal weakness. The final, fatal blow you delivered to yourself was breaking the silence from a position of utter weakness. There comes a point where even the most oblivious supplicant feels the chill of contempt. You finally felt it, so you decided to have a talk. You sat her down and unloaded a truckload of your neediness. You talked about your feelings, about how you felt unappreciated, about how much you do for her. You may have even shed tears. You laid your soul bare, hoping for empathy, for connection, for her to finally see your pain and comfort you. But you did this from the trenches of a war you had already lost. You were not a king negotiating terms. You were a peasant begging for scraps from the royal table. You were asking the victor for mercy, and she gave you none. She looked at this display of raw, unfiltered weakness, and the last embers of her attraction were extinguished. She didn't see a man fighting for his relationship. She saw a pathetic, crumbling mess. When you asked for forgiveness for your own needs, when you apologized for feeling bad, you signed your unconditional surrender. You handed her the pen and paper and watched as she wrote the terms of your defeat. Now, I can hear the objections brewing in your mind. But I was just being a good guy. Isn't compromise a part of a healthy relationship? I was taught to be sensitive and express my feelings. Let's dismantle these comforting lies right now. No one is coming to save you. Your belief that being a good guy entitles you to respect is a childish fantasy. Respect is not given, it is commanded. As for compromise, compromise is a negotiation between two sovereign powers. It is not one side consistently surrendering territory to avoid conflict. What you were engaged in was not compromise, it was appeasement. And appeasement only emboldens the aggressor. And expressing your feelings? Yes. A man must be able to communicate, but from a position of strength, not from a puddle of need. A king states his terms. A beggar pleads his case. You were pleading. You were not communicating value. You were communicating a deficit. You were showing her the gaping holes in your own soul and asking her to fill them. That is not a lover's job. It is a burden that no woman will carry for long. If you have ever found yourself apologizing just to stop a fight you knew, in your gut, you were right in, then prove to yourself that era is over. Hit the like button as a declaration of war on your own weakness. Subscribe to Psychological Dominion and activate all notifications to ensure you receive every strategic briefing. And in the comments, I want you to answer this with brutal honesty. What was the one boundary you let someone cross that you swore you never would? A broken promise to yourself, a compromised value, a surrendered dream. Name it, and let that be the tombstone of the man you used to be. This entire collapse did not happen in the light. It happened in the shadows of your own psyche. It was not in the loud arguments, but in the silent hesitations. It was in the yes you said when your entire being screamed no. It was in the text you sent when you should have maintained your silence. It was in every small act of self-betrayal you committed in the name of keeping her. You think she left you. She didn't. You dissolved. You slowly erased yourself, piece by piece, until there was nothing left for her to love, nothing left for her to respect, nothing left for her to desire. You were a ghost in your own life long before she decided to walk away. The diagnosis is complete. Your foundation was built on sand, and she was the tide. Now, from this wreckage, we begin the work of building with stone. There is no going back for the weak man. There is only the construction of the new. This is not a comforting affirmation. It is a battlefield directive. The man you were is a casualty of war, a monument to a failed strategy. You do not mourn him. You do not hold a funeral. You strip his corpse for intelligence and burn the rest. Your reconstruction is not an emotional journey of healing. It is a cold, logistical operation of demolition and rebuilding. It is tactical. It is brutal. And it begins with 3 primary commands. Cut the excess. Install the silence. Control the reaction. First, you will execute Protocol 0, the Great Severance. This is not the weak, hopeful, no contact you read about on pathetic forums. This is a complete and total amputation. Sever every line of communication, every digital tether, every social overlap. You will block her number. You will block her on every social media platform. You will not do this with a dramatic announcement. You will not write a final explanatory paragraph. You will simply vanish. One moment you are a ghost haunting her periphery. The next, you are a void. A black hole where a predictable satellite used to be. The psychological effect of this is devastatingly potent. Her mind, accustomed to your constant input, your predictable orbit, will be thrown into chaos. She will expect you to break. She will expect a late-night text, a drunken call, a pathetic plea through a mutual friend. When it does not come, you are not signaling sadness. You are signaling a fundamental shift in reality. You are communicating that the universe she knew, a universe that revolved around her power over you, has ceased to exist. You are reinstalling scarcity. Your attention, once an endlessly flowing river, has dried up at the source. The man who wants to be loved will be discarded. The man who imposes his presence will be feared. And right now, your most powerful presence is a deafening absence. The second command is to install the silence. This goes deeper than merely not contacting her. This is about mastering the domain of non-response. In the coming weeks or months, there may be an incoming probe, a text message, a call from a blocked number, a breadcrumb on a story from a friend's account. It will likely be something innocuous. Hey, just thinking of you, hope you're okay. Or perhaps, saw your mom the other day. These are not olive branches. They are tactical probes sent out to gauge your position, to see if the old, weak infrastructure is still operational. Your response to these probes will determine the entire outcome of the response. Must be absolute, weaponized silence. To not answer. Every moment she waits for a reply that never comes, the power dynamic shifts, grain by grain, back in your favor. She is sending out a signal and receiving only static. This forces her to question her own value, her own impact. You are not playing a game of who can last longer. You are demonstrating that you are no longer even on the field. You have moved to a higher ground from which her games are irrelevant. Your silence is not empty. It is a statement. It says, "My world is so full, my mission so consuming, that your transmission did not even register." You do not reconquer the old territory. You replace it with a sharper silence. The third and most crucial command is to control the reaction by rebuilding your internal kingdom. The silence and the severance are your shield. The work you do behind that shield is your sword. This is where you wage the real war, the war against your former self. You will channel every ounce of that post-breakup rage, that humiliation, that despair, not into pathetic emotional displays, but into cold, disciplined action. You will forge a new reality for yourself, brick by brutal brick. Your focus will become a laser aimed at 4 targets of hierarchical dominance: the physical, the financial, the social, and the symbolic. You'll go to the gym not to get a revenge body, but to forge physical armor, to feel the pain of growth, and to discipline your mind through the hardship of your body. You will attack your career or business with the ferocity of a starving wolf, not to impress her with money, but to build a foundation of absolute independence. Financial power is the ultimate insulator from emotional manipulation. You will reconnect with your male allies, not to complain about her, but to rebuild your tribe, to engage in missions, to sharpen each other. You will pursue a skill, a passion you abandoned for her. Learning an instrument, mastering a language, building something with your hands. This is the creation of symbolic power, proof that your identity is forged by you, not granted by a woman's approval. Arthur Schopenhauer wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone, and if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom, for it is only when he is alone that he is really free." This period of isolation is not a punishment. It is your liberation. It is the forge. You are not working on yourself to win her back. That is the logic of a slave. You are building a new empire upon the ashes of your old life, an empire where you are the only king. She is not the prize. The empire is the prize. This transformation is a plan, not a hope. It is a sequence of strategic moves, executed without emotion, designed to achieve a specific outcome, the restoration of your sovereignty. You become the absence that carries weight, not the presence that begs. You are no longer the predictable utility. You are the unpredictable force. You are the storm on the horizon, the quiet hum of a powerful engine, the man whose silence is more meaningful than another man's entire vocabulary. This is the path from the rubble she left you in, to the throne you will build for yourself. This is how you stop being the man she dismantled and become the man she can never have and will never understand. This is the economy of affection, weaponized. The blueprint for your new kingdom is laid out before you. The question is no longer what she did to you, but what you will do with the ruins. Will you remain a casualty, or will you become the architect of your own dominion? You are ready to execute, to move from theory to tactical action, then subscribe to Psychological Dominion and activate all notifications to ensure you are armed with every future strategy. Hit the like button as a formal declaration that the weak man is dead. Now, in the comments, I demand your first operational commitment. What is the one, single, concrete action you will take in the next 24 hours to begin the great severance? Will you block a number? Delete a folder of photos? Commit to a gym membership? Declare your first tactical strike. Let the record show that your war for sovereignty has begun. And so, the moment arrives. Not in a daydream you construct to soothe your ego, but in the cold, unforgiving light of a Tuesday evening. There she is, across the room. The architect of your demolition, the ghost that haunted your reconstruction. For a fraction of a second, the old wiring might threaten to spark, a jolt of adrenaline, a ghost of an echo of the old neediness. But it is just that, a ghost, an echo. It fades before it can even form, extinguished by the sheer mass of the new man you have forged in the fires of your own discipline. You don't flinch. Your heart rate is steady. Your breathing is deep and calm. You are not observing her. You are merely processing a piece of environmental data, as you would a chair or a crack in the wall. It is information without emotional weight. She sees you. Of course, the predator's eye is always drawn to movement, and you are no longer the static, predictable creature she left behind. You are in motion, not physically, but energetically. You are the center of your own small universe, engaged with your own people, your mind focused on a conversation that matters to you. Your posture is different. The spine you were accused of lacking is now a rod of iron, holding you upright with an effortless authority. You take up space not with arrogance, but with presence. She sees this new architecture and her mind short-circuits. The man she dismantled is gone. In his place stands a fortress she does not recognize, a fortress she has no key for. Her face registers a cascade of micro-expressions: confusion, surprise, a flicker of something that might be intrigue, or perhaps fear. She is running diagnostics, trying to reconcile the pathetic memory in her head with the formidable reality in front of her. A predictable man would have seen her by now. He would be anxious. He would be looking for an opening. He would be desperate for a sign of recognition. But you makes a move. A small, tentative smile. A slight lift of the hand. A gesture so subtle it could be denied if ignored. Probe. A test. Desperate signal sent into the void, hoping to hear the familiar echo of your weakness bounce back. She is offering you an opening to return to the old dynamic, to acknowledge her power, to show that she still occupies real estate in your mind. This is the final battle. It is not won with a cold glare or a smug look of superiority. Those are the weapons of a man who is still wounded, a man who still needs to prove he has won. That is still playing her game. You are not playing the game anymore. Your eyes, in a slow, casual scan of the room, pass directly over her. There is no pause. There is no flicker of recognition. There is no subtle tightening of the jaw. There is nothing. You look at her, and you see nothing. She is not a person. She is a shape, a collection of colors, a piece of the background. Your gaze continues on its path, uninterrupted, and settles back on the conversation you were having, your focus returning instantly, completely. In that moment of absolute non-recognition, you deliver the true killing blow. It is a psychological erasure more profound than any insult, more devastating than any revenge. You have communicated to her in a language older than words that she has ceased to exist in your reality. She has been downgraded from antagonist to irrelevant scenery. The board has not been flipped. You have not checkmated her king. You have simply stood up without a word and walked away from the table, leaving her to play alone. The silence you have cultivated is no longer a tactic. It is your new state of being. It is the sound of your own sovereignty. It is the ambient noise of an empire so vast and self-contained that the squabbles of a forgotten province no longer reach the throne room. Arthur Schopenhauer would have called this the ultimate victory over the will. You have not satisfied it, nor have you fought it. You have transcended it. Her desire, her regret, her presence. It is all just the blind, pointless striving of a force that has no power over a man who has found his own purpose. This is the final lesson. Respect is not requested. It is not negotiated. It is the silent tax that power imposes on the world. You did not win her respect by becoming a better man for her. You commanded it by becoming a better man for yourself, a man for whom her respect became a secondary, irrelevant consequence. Your mission was never to get her back. It was to get yourself back from the abyss of her validation. The ultimate revenge is not her misery, but your indifference. It is the cold, unshakable peace that comes from knowing that your worth is not a reflection in someone else's eyes, but a self-generating fire in the core of your own soul. You are no longer the man who was dismantled. You are the architect who built a kingdom from the rubble, a kingdom where you are the only law. She will leave that room not angry, but haunted. Haunted by the ghost of the man she could have had, the man she was never qualified to keep. She will question not you, but herself, and that is a prison of her own making. You are already free. You have now witnessed the final move in this grand strategy. The path from abdication to absolute dominion is clear. If you are committed to walking this path, to forging this inner kingdom and erasing the weakness of your past, then your allegiance is required. Subscribe to Psychological Dominion. Activate all notifications to be armed for every battle, and press the like button as a final salute to the man you once were. Now, for your final declaration. The war for your sovereignty is over, and you stand victorious on new ground. So tell me in the comments below, what is the name of your new, unconquerable empire? The final verdict is not her regret. It is your indifference.